My name is Matt, and welcome to episode 6 of Small Talk Tech, the podcast interview series where I look to uncover more similarities than differences in what makes people in tech tick. Julia Brouillette originally went to school for journalism. After a chance encounter at a data science conference, she fell in love with Python and shifted her focus to that field. We talked about her experiences in dealing with social anxiety, what made her want to change careers in the first place, and how she's obsessed with documentaries. The next episode of Small Talk Tech starts now.
So I started out studying journalism in college, which is pretty recent. I graduated in 2016. I didn't really think about switching careers until probably mid last year because I was so wrapped up in the idea of I had a very closed-minded idea of what my career looked like. But I always had this interest in technology, and I started taking classes my senior year of college that were kind of geared toward computer science. So I took a basic HTML, CSS class, and I mean very basic because it wasn't even a CS class technically. It was taught through the journalism school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was very scratching the surface of that. We just wrote a little bit of code and tested it in the browser. But that was enough for me to be it took away from my interest in journalism because I was so amazed by that.
Was it kind of one moment in that specific class, or just kind of diving headfirst into that overall that kind of made you think, maybe I should focus on going into technology or data science instead?
I took that class with the intention of having it bolster my journalism career. I took that class thinking that, okay, this is going to make me more attractive as a reporter because reporters and in these days need those kind of skills as well. Newsrooms are hiring developers and data scientists and all kinds of people in tech because they need to advance, and they can't do that without bringing those types of people on board. They need to some newspapers websites and stuff are still stuck in the 90s, it seems.
Ancient.
Yeah, they're terrible. So yeah, for me, I was taking that class, and that's also what I was being told in the journalism school. That was a constant theme of you need these skills. You basically need to be a jack of all trades and a master of all trades. You need to really hone all of these skills and use them to be a better journalist. That was the message. So in my head, taking that class, it wasn't oh, I'm going to be a computer scientist now, or oh, I'm going to go into web development. It was just, oh, I might have a better chance of getting one of the very few entry-level journalism jobs out there.
I don't want to say it's a dying field, but when there's live streams of people on Facebook that, have hundreds of thousands of views, and viewership on TV and traditional journalism is going down as well, it kind of makes you think where that whole industry is going. So I think that was very smart on your part too, to kind of maybe focus more on the technological side of things, because I think you were kind of maybe reading the tea leaves a bit, so to speak, and kind of, getting to that kind of conclusion yourself. Thankfully, while you were still in college and not 10 years into a career in journalism being damn, I might have missed my shot.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to avoid. I didn't want to corner myself into this track of traditional reporting. Not that that's not awesome. As a consumer of news, I love good journalism. I really have such an appreciation for it, and the people that do it are extremely talented. It's just, for me, I don't see that continuing on the way that it has historically. And, it's changing a lot. So yeah, I wanted to kind of give myself an edge in that way. I also took a mobile app development class. I'd say there was more of a turning point psychologically for me in that class than there was in the other class, because this one, we were on a cross-disciplinary team where they took a bunch of computer science students and a bunch of journalism students, teamed them up, and we had 3 months to build an iOS app and get it into the App Store. That was our goal, was to get it into the App Store. And then we had to present it to a panel of judges at the end of the semester. And
that seems pretty stacked on the computer science kids end, just saying.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, definitely was. It definitely was. But the whole point of that, like of it being stacked on their end, was that it was like a challenge for us journalism students to be involved as much as possible. So that was my first actual kind of trial by fire situation.
Yeah, I can imagine.
With coding, because I this was after I had taken that very basic like HTML, CSS, JavaScript class. So I was like, okay, like I have literally no coding skills trying to make a splash screen with Swift. Like it was an interesting experience. But really, I think the light bulb, I guess you could call it, in that class was that that's kind of when I realized that there was this need to bridge creative thinking with like scientific thinking, and working alongside the computer science students who had a very different way of going about projects than I had. That was really eye-opening for me, because I was just thinking like it would be cool if there was a place for me like in that field, but that kind of like brought those mindsets together, because I really think that that's where, you know, the best products, the best like innovations happen, is when there's that mixture of creativity and technicality. But at that point in time, I couldn't conceive of like a job or like a specific role that would allow me to be in that position to kind of, you know, be like the liaison between two, which I guess kind of leads me to where I am now, which is kind of exactly what I'm doing. I started working for this company a couple months ago.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm kind of in a data journalist type of role. It's a sort of like not reporter, but like very much writing and communication married with actual data analysis. And I was hired to basically be like a data storyteller, but in that I'm kind of doing all of these different things that could be considered data science, could be considered journalism. Like it's kind of a weird
like a big mishmash of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Which I like that it doesn't really fall into like any nice clean set category, because it means that there's a lot of flexibility and there's a lot of room for me to kind of just learn a lot of different things, which is what I'm looking to do at this point in my life. So yeah, that's why this is really exciting for me. I should probably talk a little bit. I feel like I skipped over like a whole 2 years, which was the time between I graduated and getting this job. I was in Texas. I graduated from UT Austin, so I was in Texas. I was loving Texas. I was like not thinking of moving home by any means. But Texas and Austin in general, it's kind of a bubble of like Texas politics. And I'm speaking in terms of like journalism jobs.
Okay.
If you're a journalist in Texas, like you're pretty much either covering Texas sports or Texas politics, because those are the only two things going on.
Yeah.
Like it is just so intense, like so dramatic all the time. So getting a job as a reporter in Austin or in Texas just started to look more and more bleak. I did a couple like really, I thought, promising interviews while I was still living there. Like drove down to San Antonio for like an all day in office interview with like everyone at the paper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like had so many moments where I thought that it was going to happen. And I never actually would ever get like told like a definitive answer. Like it was always just
kind of the runaround.
Like I would just stop. Yeah, it was so frustrating. And like that's something that I don't know, I empathize with everyone who's looking for a job, like no matter at what point in their life they're at. Like
yeah,
it just
it's never
sucks.
a fun process.
Yeah, no matter what. Especially like I don't know, I feel like when you come out of college, there's this huge like weight on your shoulders of like, okay, what now? You know, everyone's asking you what you're going to do next. You are constant, like that's your only job basically, is looking for a job.
I think too many people tend to get caught up in, you know, the what's next, because realistically, even like if you don't graduate, well, with like a master's until you're like 26, like you're 26, like that's not even realistically like a fourth of your life. So why rush through all that just to get a quarter of the way there?
That's so true. And I was actually talking to one of my friends about that the other day. Like, I don't know, it's almost looked down upon if you ever take a moment to not be like striving for the next thing. Like if you're ever just kind of appreciating where you're at. He's graduating college like this year, and he's thinking like, okay, you know, do I want to like scramble to get to the next thing, or do I want to kind of just, you know, work at Starbucks and live my life, like move to where I want to move and support myself and like just do life for a little bit. To me, like that's not really given enough credit, you know, especially in this like time where it's admired if you are if you're like busy to the point where you can't even take care of yourself. Like I see that celebrated too much, especially on Instagram and even like in real life. And I think it's something that we get from, I think it's generational, you know, it's something that gets like passed down. People like watch their parents work themselves to death, and then they feel like if they're not doing that, they're failing. I mean, that's how I feel sometimes too. I think my dad tries to remind me sometimes to like not do exactly what he did, which is funny because like it comes out. He'll say something like, oh, you know, don't worry about this too much because, you know, you're going to blink and you'll be 46 and you won't even remember like worrying about it. And I'm like, oh, thanks. That's comforting.
That's encouraging, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, like, sure. But yeah, he has a point. I'm 23. Like, I don't need to be killing myself over a career switch at this point.
For being 23, just for reference, I'm going to be 27 this year too. But like, even if you hit the pause on your professional life, personal life, everything for the next 4 years, and then we're like, let me get real serious about the job stuff. You're still 27. That's huge.
Right.
I'm sure there's so many people that wishes that they were 27 again just to get, you know, have a bit more time while they're young. So I'm a huge proponent of that. I 100% agree.
No, definitely. I think it's important to like just give yourself that space and like zoom out sometimes and see that big picture, which is so hard to do, honestly. I think people, and you know, including myself in this, like I think you can kind of ignore your own like intuition when you're doing that. So like when you're working all the time, especially if you're kind of putting that out in the form, I don't know, this is like, I'm not sure how to say it, but like, you know what I mean? If you're putting it out on social media that you're working all the time, and it's kind of, I don't want to say like a performative thing, but like everything on social media is somewhat performative, at least in my opinion. Like, you know, you're doing, if it wasn't, like you wouldn't be doing it.
Exactly. You're doing it because it looks nice and, you know, we'll get 500 likes. And
I'm not saying that's the only thing behind it. It's definitely not. It is an aspect of everything, especially on Instagram. Like, I don't know. I feel like I can only talk about Instagram because I'm only active on Instagram. So
yeah, I mean, Facebook seems to be a lot of people yelling all the time about their opinions.
Yeah,
Twitter seems like a lot of people yelling about their opinions. Instagram seems like the one that I'll agree, because maybe it's just the accounts I follow too, but it seems kind of also in like the kind of techosphere too, kind of delving into that more since I've started the podcast. Is it definitely seems like a lot of people, I don't want to say put up a front and aren't, you know, disingenuous either, but I think for posts that are permanent or semi-permanent, not necessarily just in stories, I feel like people could maybe afford to show more vulnerability of like, you know, why you failed. Like, it's kind of the same thing, at least in my opinion, why I'm not the biggest fan of giving out 8th place trophies and stuff, because that's not realistically what life throws at you. You're going to either be successful or fail. And I feel like Instagram as a platform, more people tend to only show the successes and not when they've stumbled or screwed up.
Yeah, and I'm definitely guilty of that. Like, I sometimes realize 2 weeks will pass and I'm like, oh, I haven't posted on Instagram in like a while. And like, you know why? It's because I haven't like, there's nothing I've been proud of, or like something that I've been like really excited about, or like some positive thing that I've had to share. I have to take a step back and be like, wow, like that's not what I want to do with it. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what I want it to be, but that's my like natural inclination, is to just keep all of those failures to myself, like keep all of the bad days and like hard days and like just the days where nothing happens, like the days that are just like blah, you know. Went to work, didn't do anything, came home. I think people would find something interesting in those moments. It's not necessarily obvious. the things that like I would think like, okay, this is what's interesting about my life, aren't necessarily what other people would say, oh, that's interesting about your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beauty of being open and being like showing kind of the whole picture. I think other people would really like, I think they would appreciate things about that like you might not even realize.
I was scrolling through your feed and I came across a quote that I don't know if it was necessarily, you that came up with or attributed somewhere else, but the fact that you've pushed past your fears doesn't mean that you've seen the last of them. Is there anything that you could elaborate on that quote and, maybe where you found it or kind of if you were giving yourself that advice, kind of what you were thinking then?
In January, like early January, I think I got kind of, and I think this might be something that people can relate to, the stress that is New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Or even December, just as a whole month, it seems like it's such a whirlwind.
The stress that is like the last part of the year and the beginning part of the year. Like the middle of the year is whatever.
Cakewalk.
Yeah. The middle of the year is just like the grind, like the normal grind. The beginning and the end of the year, for me, I put this internal pressure on myself to wrap up all of these things that, like pretty much like finish all of the things that I said I was going to do that year. Give myself a good head start into the next year. Do all of this like excessive amount of planning. Be like 100% on my game. And that completely, and in the past, I don't know, I wasn't so much in a place of uncertainty as I was this year at the beginning of 2018. It hadn't like crashed as much as it did this year. I went all out with that stuff because I had time to do that because I didn't have a job.
Right.
And that was like the number one pressing thing on my mind was I need to get a job this year. Like that's a non-negotiable. So I need to figure my shit out and like figure out what I even want to do, which at that point was still kind of fuzzy. On top of that, there were like all of these personal things that I wanted to work on and stuff. And, everyone has their laundry list of goals. So the first week of January was really hard for me. Because I just was kind of overwhelmed with all of this stuff that I had put on my own plate, which looking back is, I just want to like slap myself sometimes because I feel like I step on my own toes a lot and like don't even like give myself a chance to succeed or sabotage myself when I start succeeding. That quote was coming from this conversation that I had with my best friend about a lot of existential things, but primarily revolving around not having a job yet and all of the insecurities and things that was bringing out. At that point, by January, I had been like full force trying to find a job at that point because I did this internship in January of 2017, which was just a weird experience for me and very much just kind of solidified the fact that I didn't want to be a reporter anymore. Like I have really, really crippling social anxiety. I think it's something that like people think social anxiety, I think they think of like really obvious like external symptoms of that, like being like really shy and like not talking and like kind of isolating yourself. And when you think of like a socially awkward or socially anxious person, like I think people have an idea of what that is. There's preconceptions about it, of course. So I had believed those preconceptions and like I had those in my head already. So like I didn't even realize, like it took me the 3 months at that internship to work through the fact and like even acknowledge the fact that I was having anxiety about like talking to people. And like that is classified as social anxiety. Like it took me 3 months to figure that out and to accept that and like do something about it. So like that kind of was instrumental in getting me to this point as well, because it goes back to that like closed-minded view of what my career looked like. Because I thought that if I just if I was doing it for long enough, I would get over that. And, maybe I would to an extent, like maybe it would get easier, but it hasn't my entire life gotten easier. So I don't know why, like what made me believe that doing it as a job would make it easier.
Right.
Yeah, that was a revelation that I needed to have. So once I sort of realized, okay, I don't want to be a reporter. I don't want to do that anymore. I had to completely like change the way that I was even job searching, because a lot of the networking that I'd done, like all through college and stuff, like that was all kind of not lost, but didn't have as much value anymore because I wasn't looking to go into that field. So it was like, okay, like I'm starting from scratch in terms of I need to meet new people. I need to actually like get my skills up, which I didn't really have at that point. Like I went to a few conferences between my senior year of college and the year after I graduated, which is something that I think is really like, I don't know, I point to that a lot as like an underrated way of learning. Like I think they're thought of as like you go if you're like already in the field, but like if you go and like I went to a data science conference last year.
Really?
Yeah, like I hadn't at that point, like I didn't have literally no data science experience.
Just like a morbid curiosity kind of thing?
Yeah, just out of curiosity and just, yeah, for fun. If you're like interested in something that you don't have any experience in, like don't be afraid to go to a conference.
How important do you feel that participating in those kind of events in person is?
I think it's really important. It's, again, because of the social anxiety, like took me a while to actually do. But that was one of those things where I was like, okay, like I know I want to do this. It's just a matter of me getting over this hurdle. That's why I forced myself to do it, because it was like, I know this will help me.
Yeah.
You know, like
regardless of the earlier internship thing, like eventually you're going to have to push yourself to go into some sort of direction. So
I was like, this I know for sure is a good decision. And like, I think I knew that because my senior year of college, my professor took me and like another student to a data journalism conference. And I learned so much there. Like it was all like workshops and talks and panels and things like that. I got so much out of that experience that going by myself was like a completely different story,
mm-hmm.
you know, than going with people that I knew. So I think it's really helpful.
What was the biggest value you've personally taken away from going to one of these events? Like, was there just one speaker that you saw that completely blew your socks off? Was there like a quote that just kind of still at the back of your head that you heard?
I think it was the workshop where I learned the like very basics of Python, because that's what I ended up learning and using. That's what I code in now. So like that was my first exposure to it. So I just have like fond memories of sitting there and being like, wow, this is so cool.
Yeah, kind of like a big watershed moment, I'm sure. You know, looking back even 5 years from now, like,
yeah,
you'll probably see that as like the moment that it kind of clicked.
I'm
in
like,
your head.
wow, it all started. Yeah. It's also when I got my first laptop stickers.
Oh, okay.
Which is dorky, but like that was like a good memory, and like I still have them on my laptop. So it's just a good, like a constant reminder of where I started, where I'm at, which is kind of cool.
No, I definitely agree. I think stickers are pretty underrated, to be honest, because I mean, I don't have anything, you know, monumental like that to reference back to. It's mostly like I have an Apple sticker and like Soylent and bands that I like and stuff. But I think that's definitely a way to kind of catalog where you've gone to too. Almost kind of like, I guess you could think of like, you know, stamps in a passport book. So obviously in a perfect world, because I know it's not perfect, could you please describe the first 90 minutes of your day being as specific as possible? So for instance, if you wake up early, what time do you wake up? If you drink coffee, what kind do you drink? So on and so forth.
I wake up at different times every day, honestly. But usually around 8. Like that's kind of the average time, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then I pretty much like wash my face, brush my teeth, do all that fun stuff. And then I'll go into my kitchen, which is basically my workspace most of the time because I work from home like 80% of the time. That's when I like try to get work done first, like even if it's like an hour of emails or like organizational stuff. I try to work for an hour before I go and like make coffee and eat breakfast and stuff like that, because if I make coffee first, if that's like the first thing that I do, for some reason, like it just helps me to like work a little bit first and then have coffee as kind of like a reward, if that makes sense. Like if I drink coffee, I kind of immediately like want to sit on the couch and like enjoy the coffee and eat my breakfast and like not think about anything else. it gets my day started, ironically, without coffee. So, yeah. But from there, I'm pretty much working, usually doing a lot of like planning for the day, or I try to tackle like my first biggest tasks early on in the day, just in case I have errands to run or something else that I need to do later in the day. I'll try to like do something that I know I like really need to do in that first 90 minutes of the day. Oh, and I forgot like a really important thing. I make my bed every morning. That is something that I never, like, it doesn't matter if I'm, like, running late to something, if I'm gonna, like, miss a flight, like, I make my bed every morning.
Like, ironclad, never miss.
Yeah.
Just make the bed.
And my philosophy behind that, if you can even call it a philosophy, is that I feel like if you can, like, accomplish, at least for me, like, accomplishing that small, like, task at the beginning of the day, like, it kind of paves the way for me to do all of the bigger things that I need to do in the day. So, like, if I left the house without my bed made, like, it feels like I just kind of dropped the ball.
Oh, wow.
If that makes sense.
Very severe consequences. So if I was thinking that way too, I'd have to make
so
the
dramatic,
bed.
But
No, that's a good way to think of it too. Like, it's definitely starting your day off with a win. I definitely need to get more disciplined because I'm currently staring at my bed in complete disarray and blankets and pillows everywhere, and it's like a softness bomb went off. So I think I need to start adopting that too.
Yeah, anyone who knows me in real life knows a little bit of how much of a freak I am about it. A little bit, like I have to have like a clean space in order for me to like function correctly. Mm-hmm. Like if things are not clean, like that's kind of, if I'm like worried about something or stressed about something, I'll start cleaning things that are already clean. It's a thing.
Yeah. It's a good thing to have though. Like that's, if you have to have a vice to get through things,
I guess so,
having
right?
things clean.
Yeah.
I can think of probably at least 80 different things that are way worse. So I don't think it's that bad.
As a coping mechanism, it's definitely, it's productive, I guess, most of the time.
What's something you're obsessed with?
I've kind of already talked about this a little bit on Instagram, but I'm obsessed with documentaries.
Really?
And like anytime I'm watching anything on Netflix, there's a 99.9% chance that it's a documentary.
What's your favorite? If you had to pick one, which I'm sure it's just like picking children, you can't really pick your favorite.
Yeah, that's the hardest question for me to answer. And honestly, I always just say that the most recent one that I've watched, because usually that's the one that I'm obsessed with at the moment. And that's the case right now because I'm watching Wild Wild Country on Netflix.
Is that the one about the cult that's in the Midwest?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the one in Oregon. It's insane. It's extremely dramatic, and I love every minute of it.
Do you think that might have kind of been what originally got you to want to get into journalism in the first place? Is to maybe do that sort of biographical or real, like, making a murderer type stuff?
Yeah, I love investigations. I love any kind of, like, high stakes situation where people are, like, really digging into, like, trying to get to the bottom of something. I love that. And yeah, that's something that was fun about journalism for me. The documentary is just, I don't know, Netflix is getting, like, really on point with getting you hooked on these docuseries. Like, I think since Making a Murderer, like, there's been several.
I don't really watch a ton of documentaries, but I don't know if you've ever heard of the one called Jiro Dreams of Sushi before?
Yes, that's one of the best. Honestly, I think that's in my, like, top 10.
Yeah, I don't watch a ton, but that's the one that I have seen that's stuck with me the most, because just, like, the whole story of him, like, as an apprentice, starting his whole, I don't even want to say anything for people that haven't listened, but it's such a good story.
No spoilers, but, like, you have to see it.
Yeah, I think that's a must if you even hate documentaries. Not that I hate them, but they're not my favorite, but that one in particular really stuck with me.
Yeah. Another one that's kind of on, like, a more controversial subject was, like, the People versus OJ. There was a documentary, like a full-blown documentary, and then there was the show, and both are amazing. Just, like, very well done. Cool. And will suck you in if you're, like, into those types of things. Yeah,
if you find the right one, you fall down that hole, and then it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen Jumanji, but, you know, you're like Robin Williams. Like, what year is it by the time you're finished, you know, marathoning 8 episodes at once?
Yeah, that's me. That's me with documentaries and docuseries.
Yeah, I could see that. If you could get a billboard and have anything that you'd want written on it, what would it say and why?
Okay, see, this is kind of a two-part answer because I would want to ask this question, but then I would also want to know the answer, and there's no way of really knowing.
Okay.
But I would want to ask people where they're going because there's so many people on the highway going in different directions, and I don't know, there's this like running theme in my life of wanting to like trace people's footsteps in life, and like that sounds really creepy.
No, I know it's
like,
probably the documentary type thing. You're very inquisitive and want to know,
I'm interested
how
in
people.
people's like it's a storytelling thing. That's where it's coming from. Like it's coming from this like part of me that really loves stories, and I really want to know what part of the story that they're in this moment as they're sitting on the highway. Like that would be the answer that I would be going for, but you can't really get that out of a billboard question.
No, exactly. And I mean, you could even try to get philosophical with it too and say, where are you going, like in life and in general? So it works as a two-part billboard.
Exactly. It could like people could either take it as
face value.
Like where am I going right now? Like, am I on my way to work? Am I going home? Like, am I going to see a friend? Like they could take it like as an in the moment question or as a like, where am I going in life? And that could definitely get deeper.
Yeah. Where can people find you on the World Wide Web, the series of tubes? Do you have any projects that you want to talk about at all? And this is kind of your platform to talk about that and tell people where they can check you out.
Yeah, I pretty much only exist on Instagram. I'm not even like a real person. Like it's just just my Instagram. I am working on my blog, which it had serviced like late last year. And then it went away because I didn't like work on it in the beginning of this year because I got a job. There was this like whole thing where I wanted to launch like fully into my blog persona and I couldn't, but I will be going back to that soon.
So stay tuned to Instagram for more details.
Yeah, Instagram will definitely be the place where I like announce that.
Cool. And where can they find you on there? What's your username?
Oh, at Julia K. Brew. Which, if anyone has ever wondered how I say my username, that's how I say it.
Okay, well, mystery solved because I had the exact same question.
Okay, cool. Yeah. No, one of my nicknames is J Brew, so that's kind of, it's a theme.
What's a question you'd ask for the listeners, and we'll stop it here.
I think probably returning to, because I think a large chunk of what we talked about was self-awareness and thinking about what you actually want in life. So I think I would ask that, like, when's the last time that you thought about what you want?
If you made it this far, thank you for listening to Small Talk Tech. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and over at smalltalktech.com. If you like what you've heard, the best way to help us out early on is to leave us a review on iTunes. Finally, if you have any questions or comments, you can send them directly to matt@smalltalktech.com. That's MAT@smalltalktech.com. Thanks again.